Hello and welcome to this I Read Comic Books Minisode. I am your host, Brian Murray. Joining me today is the wonderful, the talented René Rodriguez.
What's up?
And we had a little bit of a technical glitch this weekend during our recording, so unfortunately we don't have the full episode to present to you, but we are going to be talking a little bit today about, now that you've seen the films or TV properties, what books you should read. So it's going to be kind of a, if you like this, read this recommendation episode.
Which is always fun, I think. You know, get new ideas out there into the world. Not really new ideas, suggestions, really.
I can definitely relate to that feeling of, I really enjoyed this, where can I find more of it? But that might not necessarily mean, you know, if you liked Iron Man, go out and read every Iron Man comic book, because who has the time, who has the willpower?
Yeah, and you know, not every Iron Man story is a winner. Most of the time, they suck.
And even the ones that are good are not always like the Iron Man movie.
Yeah.
So.
I think one of my favorite things, though, is that Iron Man is so likable in the movie series because of Robert Downey Jr., and then Tony Stark in, like, comics is a gigantic douchebag.
He is a bit, yeah. And they've leaned more in the Downey direction since that movie came out a little over 10 years ago now.
Oh, have they
time
really?
Does fly. Well, at least as far as like art style is concerned, I know the Iron Man comics that I've read have always been a little more of Tony Stark as the wisecracker sort of guy.
Oh, I've always just seen him as like the calculating kind of, like, he's the smartest guy in the room, even with, like, you know, the other smartest people in the Marvel universe. Like, he's still an enormous cock.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that. There's always going to be some of that.
Yeah. One of my favorite things was in the Spider-Man miniseries. The 616 Spider-Man travels to the Ultimate Universe, and he meets Tony Stark. And Tony Stark's like, Peter brings up, he's like, you know, my Tony Stark quit drinking. And he's like, well, that was dumb of him. And he's just got a scotch in his hand. It was just, whenever I hear Iron Man, I always think of that.
Speaking of, crippling alcoholism, one of my favorite, sorry, that's a hell of a transition to go off of. One of my favorite TV properties to come out of the Netflix Marvel joint opportunity is Jessica Jones. And I think that people who enjoy the Jessica Jones TV show might enjoy Alias, the comic. So Jessica Jones, Alias. I didn't very much at all. That was mostly an artistic difference on my part. But I do think that people who enjoy that show would probably get a kick out of Mariko Tamaki's Hulk or She-Hulk run. I know I've brought that up more than once on the show. It's a very good depiction of somebody dealing with trauma, and not always in the best, most healthy ways, just in very human ways, which I think was a big theme going through Jessica Jones. And I think that this Hulk run does a really good job of showing that as well.
I was really wondering where you were going with alcoholism, and then you were like, Jessica Jones. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
You just gotta trust me, man. You know I'm gonna get there.
I know. I was just like crippling alcoholism. Where do you go from there? But it made sense, and then you tied it even into She-Hulk. So, you know, like, that's, you know, I'm impressed. I'm impressed, Brian. I should never have doubted you.
Well, Renee, I'm an impressive kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so humble, too.
Oh, you know, the humblest. And, but jumping along with your Netflix show, Jessica Jones, if you watched Iron Fist and thought, you know, I thought he'd be cooler than this, well, you're right. He is cooler than that.
He's supposed to be.
He's supposed to be. And he's supposed to be, you know, there's all kinds of problems with the Iron Fist show, which, you know, just basically goes down to Marvel not caring about that show and just caring about money. But if you're like, hey, I still feel like I kind of want to know more about Iron Fist, one, you should hit up Xander on Twitter, because he's all about the Iron Fist. And two, you should read Iron Fist, The Living Weapon by Care Andrews. I don't know how to spell it. It's like I don't know how to say his name. It's either Care or Care. I don't know. But it's from 2014. It's relatively. Oh gosh, that was like 4 years ago. Ugh. It's still a really good series. I have read it. Xander has read it. Highly recommend. And it's a pretty awesome story. And if you don't know a lot about Iron Fist, even though it's still relatively new, it's a good starting point to get to know more about that character.
And going from there, I'd also recommend the Power Man and Iron Fist series that came out probably 2 years back now. It was shortly before Civil War II, so whenever that was.
Did that take place right before Civil War II, or it just came out in the same year as Civil War II?
It took place at the same time in the Marvel chronology. I know there was a point in time in which Luke Cage was tossed in prison, and there was this whole thing with Captain Marvel breaking in, and I don't remember it very well, so I'm not going to try and give a full recap.
Okay.
But I do remember being very entertained by that series. They made Iron Fist very energetic, and it's a sort of Iron Fist trying to get the band back together. You know, he wants to convince Luke to get back into fighting crime instead of just hanging out and being a dad for him and Jessica Jones's kid.
That sounds awesome. That sounds exactly like Danny Rand. Like, Danny Rand is probably closer to, like, Spider-Man than Daredevil in attitude, you know? And I felt like in the TV show, he just seems lost.
Yeah, they were absolutely trying to capitalize on Daredevil's success by making, this is just Kung Fu Daredevil now.
With, poorly choreographed Kung Fu. Because, again, they just didn't care, and everything was rushed, which... Honestly, I'm hoping that Season 2 is better, but from the trailer I saw, it looks like it's not.
Well, hope springs eternal. At least Daredevil's still good. Daredevil Season 2 is still good. I assume 3 will be good.
I mean, I'm actually, I'm not on the Daredevil bandwagon.
No?
No. I watched the first season, and I was okay, up until, they got to near the end, and I was like, they ruined Kingpin. I thought that he was... I just didn't like the way that they wrote him, and he's I also didn't understand how he got into power, and also how or why these people follow him. It didn't really make any sense why they would, because he's he has a plan, we trust in him, and they're like, the plan has failed, and he's like, I'm unsure about myself, but I'm also in love with this woman, and I was like, what? Where is the power-hungry guy from the streets that just wants to rule everything?
Yeah, I understand the impulse to try and make your villain sympathetic in some way, but I did enjoy the Kingpin more as just this gigantic gangster, essentially. He was like a mob boss, and he was an undisputedly shitty man. Yeah,
and this is the thing. I enjoy the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck more than I do the TV series.
Xander, you're going to cut that out, right?
I've actually talked to him about that before, and if you watch the director's cut, it's a lot better, and not a lot better, but it's better. And I think it's mainly because of Michael Clark Duncan's Kingpin.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. That was perfect casting. And even at the end when Ben Affleck's bleeding all over the place, he's like, why did you kill the only two people I ever loved? And he's like, business. It's all it ever is business. I was like, that's Kingpin. That's Kingpin, man.
You've read some Daredevil comics, right? What would you recommend people go for?
Oh, I would definitely go with Frank Miller's The Man Without Fear. It's a fantastic run. Brian Michael Bendis' run of Daredevil. I don't remember the numbers, but there is a trade for it. And also Mark Waid's run, I think from 2014, was right after Shadowland. Now, it is a little bit confusing because there's a lot of stuff that happened right before then in Shadowland and all that. But honestly, you can just gloss over that. They mention it in the comic, in the Mark Waid one, but it's nothing that you really need to know a lot about to get into that arc. And It's really fun, and it also has a throwback kind of art style to like the '60s. And I did really like that run by Mark Waid. So I would just definitely recommend that arc, by the one by Mark Waid, the one by Brian Michael Bendis, which is considered one of the best runs of Daredevil, and also the Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and art by John Romita Jr.
Now, have they upgraded his costume, or is it still kind of like the dumb spandex with the overlapping D's on the front?
I think that here's the thing. He's changed costumes a lot. So I think in The Man Without Fear they show a couple of different costume changes, but I think right now currently he's still in the red spandex. But there was a while in the 90s that he had this kind of armored suit or whatever, and it was black and gray. It was super dope. And then,
that sounds like the 90s. Covered in pouches, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And in the Shadowland arc, he was wearing like a dark version of his suit or whatever, because he was the leader of the Hand in that. Dun dun dun. His costumes change, but they keep going back to Old Faithful because that's just what people recognize.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that changes now that most people are going to recognize the Netflix suit.
Yeah, but I mean, they did that with Spider-Man too. Like, Spider-Man changes his costumes, all the time, but he always goes back to Old Faithful. And every single time he puts on the old suit, he's like, this is the best feeling, blah, 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 blah. He's like, it feels like home, yada, yada, yada. It's like, we get it. You want him in the regular suit so people can tell who it is.
We get it. You like how the spandex makes your butt look.
Well, I mean, he's never, not wearing spandex. I mean, it's always been spandex.
It's true, and I guess he kind of pointedly would not know how the spandex would make his butt look. So,
I mean, he does, he's made a couple jokes about, people checking him out or whatever, so I think he is aware. I mean, he does have mirrors.
He knows he's hot.
Yeah. His spider-enhanced features.
René, what else have you watched that you have a recommendation to go off of?
Okay, so, here's the huge thing. With the Teen Titans Go, the new Teen Titans Go movie has come out, and there's probably going to be a resurgence of the old Teen Titans series, the TV show.
I've heard that. Yeah, on DC's new streaming service, whenever that comes out.
Yeah, and then there's also going to be the live-action series Titans. Now, if you watched any of the old Teen Titans or watched Teen Titans Go, and you're probably going to watch Titans, I would highly suggest reading Jeff Johns' Teen Titans run from 2003 to 2007, because it's absolutely fantastic. It's got all the teenage angst and drama you want with action in it, and it's got some of the best storytelling. And it also ties in directly to the bigger events that DC had, like Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis. And that's a good starting point to try to, jump into those big things, to read some part of this story and then be like, oh, I do understand what's going on if I get into that bigger book. So it is helpful that way. But it's a fantastic series on its own. It's one of my favorites of all time. I actually own, I think, almost that entire run in trades. Super awesome. I would highly recommend it. Brian, have I forced you to read that before?
I don't think so. I don't remember it. Is that something that people would understand without having read those bigger event books?
Yes, because it's very self-contained. So the first issue does start off where it's in the aftermath of a certain event, but you can actually buy the graphic novel that has that certain event. I believe it's a crossover with Young Justice and The Outsiders. But it leads up to the death of Donna Troy, who was a regular member, who was an original member of the Teen Titans, and Young Justice is another sort of teen hero group that was too young and they weren't accepted into the Teen Titans, and the Outsiders are Dick Grayson's team after the Teen Titans, so they weren't a team right now, and they were sort of colliding, and then what happened was they started to fight a robot that ends up killing one of the original members of the Teen Titans, Donna Troy. And then both teams sort of break up and feel guilty about that. And then the series starts with Cyborg, Starfire being like, you know what? We need to bring back the Teen Titans because, we're a family, and it shows the responsibility of, the position you're in. And, it was just great for teenagers to have someone their age to understand them who also fights crime. And so that's where it starts. And so you need I would say that it's a couple things that you don't necessarily need to know, because it does bring it all. It's very self-contained in the book, and it tells you everything you need to know. But I would definitely look into that. I would look into Young Justice and The Outsiders if you wanted more background, but I don't think you necessarily need it, because I know
But anybody with a passing familiarity with the DC universe is going to be fine.
And if you watch the Teen Titans show, you'll know a lot more than you think you do, because like Slade is a regular thing, Cyborg's in there, Starfire's in there, Beast Boy, Raven, and a new Robin is in there, Tim Drake. But I mean, Dick Grayson does show up on occasion as well. So, and if you watched Young Justice, you will also see some characters in there as well. But since this book came out before Young Justice, it's in a very different capacity.
Yeah, going off the topic of teams of youngsters, I don't know about you, René. I'm a big fan of Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I actually just found out today there is a Stranger Things comic that's going to be coming out in the not-too-distant future. Or is maybe already coming out. I've done no research. I saw a cover on a website. That's what I've got. But for fans of Stranger Things, I'd like to push very hard for Paper Girls. It's got that same 80s aesthetic. It's got that same, sort of ragtag team of kids. It's got the same vaguely cosmic horror to it. So it is also just very good if you're not a fan of Stranger Things. But
I mean, it's safe to say that a lot of people are into Stranger Things. So.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really connects it for me is the weird spaceship meat machine that they find in the basement of one of the houses early in Paper Girls. We're talking first handful of issues they find that. It just reminded me so much of the Upside Down from Stranger Things, because everything is kind of veiny and disgusting looking on the surface. It's the kind of thing that seemed like it would have been perfectly at home in Hawkins, Indiana, as presented by Stranger Things.
Yeah. Where are they in Paper Girls? I don't even remember.
It's somewhere in the Midwest. I want to say it's in Ohio.
That makes sense. Everything takes place in the Midwest in the 80s with weird, creepy stuff.
Well, I'm from the Midwest. It's weird and creepy. So.
It must be all the trees, right?
Yeah, it's the fact that it's dark so much of the year. We get a little stir crazy.
Yeah, and basically none of the roads are lit at night. Seriously, none of them. I can't believe how ridiculously dark it is.
Yeah, driving at night in rural Michigan, you're really kind of putting your fate in God's hands there.
No wonder horror stories always take place in the Midwest. Good Lord. Do you remember that Michigan Chillers series from 2004?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all of those are based off of real mysteries and myths in Michigan. That's messed up.
Yeah, on the subject of horror books or horror in general, I think I'm a big fan of pretty much any Alien comic book that I've read. I've enjoyed. That includes Aliens Dust to Dust. Has been pretty good so far. The first issue didn't really sell me, but I kind of got into it after getting my hands on number 2.
Now, when you say aliens, do you mean just that there are aliens in them, or it's specifically tied to the Aliens franchise?
Specifically, the Aliens franchise.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure.
One of my favorite things about the Alien franchise of comic books is all the crossovers that they do with stuff you would not expect. I have Vampirella versus Aliens. That was an interesting crossover. It's just kind of a future where vampires are just known to exist.
I have no words. To describe how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have it digitally, I would loan it to you, but I have it through Comixology, so can't really do that.
Yeah.
But
You know, I know that there's a lot of those alien crossover books because I know they did it the same thing with Predator. Because I used to have a Predator versus Batman comic.
I have Aliens versus Batman on my wish list. I haven't gotten it yet, but
man, I'm now going to try and find a physical copy of that to give you for Christmas or something. I'm trying to force physical comics back into your life, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, if every physical copy of Vampirella didn't make me look like a pervert, then I'd be all in favor of that. But like, I don't know. That's not the topic. We're not going to dig in on that. That's a whole different thing.
I mean, I'd have to throw away so many books if, like, I was worried about that. You know, just because it's like, why are all the women drawn so, you know, not anatomically correct? Dude,
Did you mean every manga?
No, but I mean, probably
but
that
most
too.
Of them.
I mean, I'd probably have to throw out, you know, the manga as well. Although, well, I don't know about everyone. Banana Fish might be safe. I just got that one.
Now, see, that just sounds dirty. We're not doing that. We're not doing this.
Banana Fish is not dirty.
Yeah, we don't have time. That's a different topic.
Okay, it's not dirty, but I mean, it's actually really good. It's actually just got re-released in the U.S., but you're right. We don't have time. I'll talk about it.
We can veer back on a topic and still talk about manga. You watched the Death Note movie, right?
Okay, so here's the thing. I got like 28 minutes into the movie before I shut it off.
That's astounding, because I know that you've sat through some crappy movies.
I've
sat through them with you.
Yeah. I've watched Mean Girls. How Lord knows how many times.
All right, this podcast is over.
I did that.
You come into my house and disrespect Mean Girls. We don't have time for this.
I did that specifically because I know how much you like that movie. Because I've been over to your house and it's like, we're watching Mean Girls again? Yeah, it's a good movie.
For fans of Mean Girls, I recommend Giant Days.
Oh, that would explain why I don't like Giant Days. Brian's super mad at me now. I can feel it through the computer.
It's true. You should see the face I'm making. It is horrific.
It's not that I don't like it. It's just that, like, because I read, like, the first volume and I was just like, I mean, I get it. It's just not for me. So it's not that I disliked it. It's just that I was like, I don't care to continue reading, I guess. It's just one of those things that's not my thing. It's definitely other people's thing, but it's not mine.
So what's the thing you did like that you can make a recommendation off of then?
Well, I guess we could jump back into the Netflix Death Note, because that movie was atrocious and not like the manga at all. So if you somehow watched the Death Note movie and even watched it all the way through, and you're still like, you know, I do want more of this. I don't know how that could be possible. But, you know, if you are, just read the manga. It's so much better, honestly. Even if you didn't watch the Death Note, don't watch the Death Note Netflix movie, okay? It's garbage. It's trash. It's terrible. They're making a second one, too, which I don't know how, because it got really bad reviews. The only thing worth anything in that movie is Ryuk, played by...
It's Willem Dafoe, right?
Yes, thank you. Willem Dafoe. Nails it as Ryuk, but they ruined Ryuk's character, so it's, like, bad. Honestly, just read the manga or watch the anime. It's so much better. It's so insanely better. Like, even my one of my best friends who hates anime, he can't get into it at all. He watched Death Note in, like, 2 weeks because he thought it was so good. Ugh. Did you watch the Death Note movie, Brian?
No, I didn't, and I'm trying to think of a way to segue back into our topic, but I'm drawing a blank here.
Speaking of terrible movies, if you watch the Green Lantern movie...
Yeah, I know. It's just, this topic is supposed to be, if you liked this, you should try this. And we've just been talking about, these movies are bad, read this instead, which I guess is kind of on topic.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the Green Lantern movie, I wanted it to be good, and it was not. And I was very sad. But I would definitely... And Green Lantern's a really hard, like, series to just jump into because it's got so many weird things in it, and the timeline is all messed up. But honestly, don't jump into Green Lantern if you have to know everything about something.
I will say that I read Darkest Night and Brightest Day was the follow-up to that, right?
Blackest Night. But yeah,
Blackest Night and Brightest Day.
Brightest Day.
I read both of those with zero context in the DC universe, and I was able to follow those pretty well. If you liked that Green Lantern movie, or if just the idea of a Green Lantern appeals to you, accept that you will be confused for the first couple of issues worth of comics, and then it all just kind of references stuff that happened in that run. So if you're reading the trade, just make sure you read the little blurb at the beginning to kind of set the scene for you, and you'll be fine. So I know you read a lot of Hellboy, right, Renee? Because I was a big fan of those movies, but I've never actually gotten into the books.
I've read a decent amount of Hellboy. I've definitely read I've read a couple volumes of it. I actually borrowed them from our good friend Mark, who is obsessed with Hellboy.
Oh, yeah. Mark was a huge fan.
Yeah, so Hellboy is definitely really, really interesting, and it's even has a couple spin-off series like Abe Sapien and BPRD, and I don't know if Lobster Johnson has his own series. But yeah, if you enjoyed Hellboy Seed of Destruction by Mike Mignola is the best way to start off, especially since Seed of Destruction was the basis for the first Hellboy movie.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's really easy to follow. A lot of similarities are there, and that's definitely the best place to start for Hellboy. And honestly, I love Mike Mignola's art. It's kind of like goofy and clunky, but it really works with the series, especially since it dives super deep into the occult.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where Hellboy without Mignola's art would look bizarre. He's the only person I can really imagine drawing Hellboy and having it actually look like Hellboy.
Yeah, because even other artist renditions of Hellboy, they look not right, and it's just Mignola's art style is the only one that seems to fit. But I am excited for that new Hellboy movie that's coming out. It's gonna be sick.
Oh, I saw that with the cop from Stranger Things.
Yeah,
playing Hellboy, right?
Yes, sirree. And Daniel Day Kim is going to be in it, I believe, as a werewolf or something like that. So that's exciting. I like Daniel Day Kim.
For sure.
He was that guy in Lost, and he was on Hawaii Five-0 for any 5-0 fans. Just realized Hawaii Five-0 is for the people that still watch regular basic cable, people in their 40s.
This one is going to be kind of a stretch for fans of the Fast and the Furious franchise. I'm going to go ahead and recommend Motor Crush. It's definitely much more fantastical than Fast and the Furious, since there's a drug for your car that also the main character takes, even though it's supposed to make people explode. This is all from the first issue too.
What is this book?
Motor Crush. It's centered around this young woman who is a motorcycle racer who by night does illegal street racing for what is essentially a fuel additive that also the motorcycles get hooked on. Look, I haven't really read that much of it, but what I have read, I've really enjoyed. And I think that people who enjoy that sort of Fast and the Furious street race bombastic style of storytelling might also get a kick out of some of the racy's a word. Some of the more race-centered parts of Motor Crush. It's also got interesting characters that are well developed, but I guess Fast and the Furious also has that. Now that I think about it, there's pretty good character building in the one movie that I've seen.
Which one? I'm just curious.
The first one.
Oh, okay. I actually really liked the first one, and then I saw the second one and was like, that franchise isn't going to last. And then I actually saw the third movie in theaters, and I was like, there's no way. I was like, this is the end of the series. And here we are, 6 movies later.
Yeah, one of these days, Xander is going to sit me down and educate me on those movies. But
is Xander really into those movies?
I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't want to say that he's really into them, but I know that he enjoys them. And it's that kind of thing where he says, "Man, we got to watch those movies," and I say, "Yeah, totally," and then we never make plans to because we're adults and who has time to sit down and watch 9 movies?
Not I. But I mean, along with that, if you're into Fast and Furious and all that, there is a new series, relatively new. It's called Death or Glory. It's by Rick Remender, and it's actually kind of Fast and Furious meets Ocean's 11. It's about this woman named Glory who is trying to pay for her father's surgery, and then she has 3 days to pull off a heist on the road with a bunch of like other criminals or whatever. So it's got fast cars and it's got, you know, a heist. So it's and the art is by Bengal, which it looks phenomenal. I haven't read it yet. I've been dying to, but it looks really cool. From what I've seen, it looks pretty amazing. So. See,
now I just want to go watch The Italian Job.
Which Italian Job?
Oh, the one with Seth Green, of course. The remake.
I knew it. I like that you pulled Seth Green instead of Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Or even Edward Norton. Like, any of the two main, you were like, yeah, Seth Green.
That kind of tells you where my pop culture priorities lie.
That's good. I feel like I have to say this. If you are watching the Justice League movies or you've watched Man of Steel and the Dark Knight trilogy, there are definitely some books that you should check out. For Man of Steel, whether you like or dislike that movie, I think you should really read Superman Earth 1 by J. Michael Straczynski and with art by Shane Davis. It's Superman in the modern age with all the angst and kinds of stuff, and it just does it really well. And it's a fantastic series. And that's a brilliant starting off point. It's a Superman for the modern age. And for the Dark Knight trilogy, if you loved those movies, you should definitely read The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb with art by Tim Sale. That book is actually what Christopher Nolan read to sort of make his movie out of it. So there's a lot of similarities there. If you've seen The Dark Knight, The Long Halloween, you'll be able to jump into that no problems. And I would also recommend Batman Year One by Frank Miller. Also has a lot of influences on Batman Begins. So it's really easy to just jump into. And Batman Earth One by Jeff Johns, with art by Gary Frank, is kind of just like Superman Earth One. It's a modern retelling of the Batman series. So I would just suggest those as well.
Yeah, just kind of their way of trying to get around 60, 70 years of material to refresh their stories.
That's always the hardest thing, because, I don't know about you, but I have friends that call me after the new Marvel or DC movie has come out, and they're like, I have so many questions, I don't know where to begin, because how is this like this, or whatever, and you can't just be like, oh, well, go read this comic, it explains everything, because it ties into 20, 30 things.
None of my friends call me, and if they did, they would not be my friends. I get texts sometimes, but
I like that that's the connection you made with that, was not the yeah, I understand comics have a long history, it's hard to get into them, you're just like, my friends don't call me, and that's the way I like it.
Yeah, well, also, in our friend group, I'm 5th or 6th down the ladder of people you would ask a comic book question from.
Really?
Or two. Renee, we're recording a comic book podcast. A lot of our friends know a lot about comics.
I guess that's true. We don't really ask each other about them. We more have a very wide discussion of other things about the movie, really.
Yeah, I'm much more enthusiastic than I am well-informed. Let's put it that way.
Thanks for listening to the I Read Comic Books podcast. You can follow Brian and Renee on Twitter at BrianHead and at Rodrigo29. You can also follow the show at IRCB Podcast. We retweet all sorts of comic book stuff, and we post polls every Sunday this week's poll, which is the best Spider-Man villain, or worst, depending on how you see it. I picked 4 that I thought were really cool. They're kind of my favorites, but if you disagree, let us know. Reach out to us on Twitter. You can also check out the I Read Comic Books Goodreads group, where we have all sorts of threads talking about comics, what we're reading, as well as our latest thread, which is the Goodreads Book of the Month thread, all about the book that we're reading, Mouse. You can email the show at ircb@destroythecybe.org. You got any questions, thoughts, concerns, things you want to see in the future, let us know. Send us an email. Don't forget, we've got a brand new Patreon that you can subscribe to if you really want to give back to the show and you really want to have some influence and get access to some pretty cool stuff. Make sure to head over to patreon.com/IRCBpodcast. Check that out. Throw us a few dollars and we'll throw you some really cool exclusive content. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all the music for the show. We cannot thank them enough for their contribution. They are the best. Xander is a higher power traversing this mortal plane, and he also edits the show, and that makes him pretty cool. So finally, I want to say thank you to the listeners. Thank you to Brian and Renee for doing this show. I'm Mike Rappin, and until next time, be kind, rewind.